when we got up this morning, we did not have the answers to every single thing that was going to happen today. And it doesn't stop us from still getting up and going through our day.
Talking about whether or not I should be fully bald, I think is a really authentic way to start this conversation.
Not a problem.
Because you are right. I literally cut my hair every Monday and every Thursday. Because even the difference, if I don't do it, I do it once a week. By the following week, it looks too long.
Yeah.
So, I'm considering it.
Definitely. So, I think, maintenance-wise, it's easy. I guess I'm already shaving my face, so just doing my head doesn't, and it's just easier to take care of. You don't end up with, like, if you have a hat on, if you're somewhere cold, all of a sudden you have like little fuzz balls in your hair.
All the time. Yeah. My kids call me a chicken. Usually it's like chicken feathers.
Exactly.
Like a new sweatshirt. Interesting. Well, this is definitely the first time I've ever introduced the podcast guest this way. So that's one way to start a show. Zander, I'm super pumped to have you here. And I know, when you sent over your bio originally, it was all about joy and enthusiasm. And I think evident by the first, minute of our conversation here, you seem like a dude who loves life. Like, where did that come from for you? Has that always been your thing, or is that something that you just sort of developed at a certain point?
I think it's just inherently part of who I am. I'm relentlessly positive, and some people have said I'm sort of the god of enthusiasm, because if I really like something, I'm really into it. I want to share that. For me, knowledge is no good if I'm not sharing it. And I think there's so much good in everyone's life but we forget it. And as a mental health professional, I understand that. I talk to clients and we're talking about the stuff that isn't going right. And yet we all somehow forget that, in my opinion, 97% of our day is actually really good, and up to 3% isn't so good. Now, obviously there are days where it's more than 3%. We just have a really bad day. That happens. That's life, right? However, people forget. And so when I talk to my clients and stuff, they'll talk about all the little things that went wrong. Well, it's not to ignore them, but they're ignoring all of the really great things that did happen. And I'll give you a very basic, and I don't want to sound modeling here, but Jim, you and I woke up this morning. That is a really good start. Not that we 100%. Weren't going to wake up, but and somehow we forget that, right? I sort of use this analogy, I call it the picnic analogy, which is, let's say we're on a picnic and we're out there for 4 hours and it rains for 2 minutes. And then someone says, Jim, how was that picnic? Oh, it was great, but it rained. Okay, 2 minutes out of 4 hours. That means that 3 hours and 58 minutes, it was sun and it was good. And so why, right? So I am really positive about stuff. I think life generally is good. There are struggles, but how we deal with them, how we interpret those struggles makes a big difference in how we get through them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, where do I start from there? Because there's so many ways I want to dive into that. It's a great analogy, so thank you for sharing that. B, I think a lot of people also could look at, hey, maybe that 2 minutes of rain might have happened for a reason, and it, maybe I just don't know what it is yet. Is there, like, if we start to look at really being intentionally grateful for all the things, and definitely I want to co-sign how grateful I am to have woken up today. It's a conversation I actually had with my son yesterday about how often we take that for granted. Like, we wake up and we immediately start to think about the things that we have to do. And we don't usually stop to think, and how fortunate am I to have woken up today?
Yeah.
So it's a great spot to really be intentional about starting your day with that gratitude. But back to my question, is there an application for in being intentionally grateful for even that 2% that you just don't know yet how it's going to work out in your favor?
Yeah, well, here's what I'll pivot a little and say. Many years ago, I read this book. I was sort of talking about Buddhism and business, and of course, there was many things in the book. The one thing that I pulled away from that was that in Buddhism, there's this idea that nothing is inherently good or bad. It's how we interpret what it is. So let's go back to the sun being out, okay? Where I am, the sun is out. It's beautiful. It's great. But if I'm someplace, let's say I'm a farmer, or more importantly, let's say I'm in Southern California right now, I might want some rain. So the sun being out may not be a good thing. But the sun in and of itself being out is not good or bad. It's how I interpret the sun being out.
Yeah. I laughed a little when you first mentioned that because I immediately thought of our conversation about bald heads sunburn. Yeah. But yeah, too much sun might be a good thing. Might be a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you're a farmer and there's a drought, the sun being out is not a good thing for you.
Right.
However, if we, again, the sun in and of itself isn't good or bad. It's how we interpret it. Our day, whatever happens to us, we hit a traffic jam on the way to a meeting. It's not, traffic jam itself is not good or bad. It just is. How we interpret it, I think, makes a big difference. The things that happen to us in our life, oh, it's so unfortunate this thing happened. Yeah, there are. Look, I've had tragedies in my life. But the way that I deal with that has made a huge difference.
So how does someone start that process? Because I am definitely a big believer in everything is going to work out in your favor. You may just not know how yet. So personally, when I approach a situation it's awful, right? We had a fire at the restaurant and the restaurant burned down. Awful. Good news, we got to rebuild it in a beautiful way to memorialize what was, bring some new people in. It turned out better than it would have had it just stayed operational.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, I tend to look at these things sort of in a journaling way, where I could look back and say, hey, this thing that was a tragedy, was the worst day ever. How did it work out for good? And then I start to build up this belief system that the next time something bad happens, I already know in a future date, I'm going to be writing in my journal how thankful I am that this thing happened because it led to X, Y, and Z. How does someone start that process to kind of build that belief up?
I think the first and foremost, Jim, you have to remember that you always have choice. Choice is so powerful. It is so empowering, okay? And look, I will absolutely grant that a lot of times our choice is crap and crappier, okay? We wish we had a third, but we don't. But even if there are two choices that you're like, wow, both of these are not ideal, you empower yourself by saying, I'm not just waiting for whatever's going to happen. I'm actually choosing this one. There's intentionality there. I'll give an example. I was many years ago, I was in a long-term relationship and everyone expected us to get married, and I thought I would get married and stuff. But I realized that I wasn't really happy, so I wanted to try and see if I could, fix things. And it turned out that those things weren't going to be fixable. So I ended that relationship. But the moment for me was when we were in couples counseling. I was asked if I was happy. And it seemed like an easy enough question, but I took time and I reflected on it. And the answer was I wasn't happy. It wasn't looking down the road. I didn't see a life that was what I envisioned. And I realized that I had a choice. Just because I was already 7 years into this relationship and there was obviously a lot of emotional and just everything that goes into a 7-year relationship. I had a choice. I didn't have to do this, even though everyone expected that I was going to do it. And that made a huge difference. That really changed my life, where I said, I do have a choice. I have a choice on how I want to deal with stuff. We can define a situation, or it can define us. So you lost the restaurant. That could have defined you. Oh my gosh, the restaurant burned down. This is horrible. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying it's not. But if you made a choice to say, we're going to rebuild and honor what this legacy was, that's awesome. How empowering for you to say, yeah, this was terrible. However, it's not the end of who I am or the end of this dream.
Right. So now, how do you juggle that choice when it comes to things you don't necessarily want to do but should or have to do? Where we get into like the discipline aspect of, hey, I've got to have a really difficult conversation with someone at work today. The choice to approach it in a positive way or a negative way. So let's remove the choice of, hey, do I have to do it or not? Right. So in your scenario before, do I have to stay in this relationship, or is there a route out? Right. Let's assume for a situation you're in something that there is no out route. You're going to have to go through it.
Yeah.
How do you make the mental shift to enjoy it? Right. Sort of let's change it from have to get to.
Well, again, you may not enjoy a difficult conversation. It is a difficult conversation. So there are going to be a lot of feelings. However, every day there are difficult decisions that we have to make for ourselves personally, or as a parent, right? I'm a parent too. There are decisions I've had to make where my daughters were not happy with that decision, but I knew they weren't going to be happy, right? Like, no, you can't do this, or whatever, right? But you still make it, because even though it's difficult, they're going to be upset. You're going to have to try and console them. They may not want to talk to you for a day or two, or whatever. You as a parent can see further down the road than they can. So maybe you're like, yeah, I got to make that decision. But again, I think it's, if you realize it, even though you don't want to do it, it is something that has to be done. And once you do it, it's rarely as bad as we make it up in our mind. Okay. I talk to my clients a lot if we're talking about relationship issues or something, or a difficult conversation. And I said, don't have the conversation in your head without that person being there. Because what happens is we tend to, first of all, let me just say that the meanest person in my life is me, and possibly in your life is you. We say such unbelievably mean things to ourselves every day. And I just want to say, stop. Don't do that. That's just not, it's not good. But we do. We say, oh, you're not going to be successful. That's not going to work. You're not good enough. You're not fit enough. Whatever the negative self-talk is. But when we have the conversation, with some difficult conversation, you're thinking about talking to someone at work and it's a disciplinary thing, or it's uncomfortable or whatever. If you start to think about it too much in your head, what happens is it goes horribly wrong. So by the time you actually get into the conversation, you've got your battle armor on, you're rounding second base ready, and you come out guns blazing, right? And this person's like, whoa. And it doesn't go well, because your energy is so strong coming out the gate, because you're all ramped up for this. You've been having this conversation for 3 days already. and they're like, all of a sudden that person's like, whoa, wait, what's all this? Whoa, what's going on? And they get defensive. So then you get more defensive, and it just doesn't go well. But if you sort of say, okay, yeah, I notice I'm doing that. Stop that. Let me have that conversation. Oftentimes the conversation goes a heck of a lot better than we thought.
Yeah. I'm thinking in that scenario just now, that person will also say, I knew it was not going to go well. I knew it was going to be a fight. Right? And they're sort of reinforcing the negative that they created by going into it with that negative attitude and all that.
Yeah, like that prophet, that, like, sort of that manifestation of this is going to be hard, and it is hard. It doesn't have to be hard. It may be.
Right.
It may not go well, but here's what I want to remind you and everyone else, Jim. I think you'd have the answers to everything. Yes, you can think through things. You can think about what you want to say, how, if you know this person, how you think they may react, how you're going to sort of help, stop us, if they start to spin out or something like that, if they're someone who's prone to anxiety or strong emotional reaction. You might say, okay, how might I, it's great to think ahead. How might I deal with the fact that I think Bob is, I know he reacts strongly to negative feedback or what he interprets as negative feedback. How can I help him? Right? And if you come in and you're calm, you've thought through what's going to happen. So if that does happen, you're able to say, yep, I've expected that, and I've thought about how I'm going to remain calm, even if inside part of you is like, engage, right? But if you don't engage and remain calm and say, look, Bob, I get how you feel, but this is what's going on.
Yeah.
You talk about difficult conversations. When I was going for my license, for my mental health license, I was doing an internship in middle school and high school. And being a male therapist, there aren't a lot of us. And especially in middle school, but also in high school, I got asked to have the hygiene conversation with quite a few young men. Now, let me tell you that's a really uncomfortable conversation to be having with another man. Like, dude, you got to shower. You got to find some deodorant, like, and that's real. And these are people I don't even know, but I'm still asked, hey, Jim, why don't you come in? Let's talk about it. I got to say that our bodies are changing. Like, I got really good at this conversation. I did not like having this conversation. Someone's personal hygiene, that's their choice. But when it gets to a point where you're like, holy moly, dude, like, I could smell you 5 minutes after you left. It was, the BO was terrible. Can we please try and think about doing something? And those are conversations sometimes that you have to have with employees, and it's a delicate conversation, right?
Yeah. Is there a component of that you have to think about the good that comes after? Right. So by you stepping into that uncomfortable situation, having the conversation, yes, it sucks for you right now, but because you have that conversation, you're preventing that person from enduring, years of
Absolutely. I mean, thinking about what the long-term effect is yeah, I'm trying to help this person out. Like anything, we can try and help someone out. They can choose to take your advice or choose not to take your advice.
Let's go on that for a second, because I think there are also a lot of people who try to help other people and then get really frustrated when they don't want to act or take our advice. So it becomes a situation where, like, hey, I recognize something about you. I'd love to help you. I'm giving you some free advice here. I'm wanting to pour into you. And that person bucks the system. They don't want to take that advice. And then it builds this sort of resentment for, now I'm angry at you because you're not doing the thing that I asked you to do. Right? How do we navigate that situation where you got someone in your life that you love and you want to see them thrive, but you start to sort of take it personally when they don't act on the things that you're asking them to do?
Well, here's what I'm going to say, Jim. If we recognize that we have choice, we have to recognize the other person has choice. And even though they're not making the choice that we would like for them, even though we might be able to see the ramifications down the road, the same way that I want someone to honor the choices that I'm making. I'll bring us back to the beginning and say, I knew that I was going to lose my hair because my mom's dad and her brother lost their hair and stuff. So my having hair, when I started to shave my head, my mom was kind of bummed about it because she's like, why are you doing this? And stuff like that. But I don't need my mom to tell me that I made the wrong choice. It's my life. It's my head. I get to do with it what I want. She doesn't have to like it, but she does have to accept it in the same way that we can talk with someone and we can encourage them as much as we can. But if they're not ready to make a change, if they're choosing not to, we have to support them. I'll give another more perhaps real life and something with bigger consequences. In my life, there are people who've had addiction, alcohol. I had one friend of mine who was using drugs as a teenager, and I didn't like it, and I let them know I didn't like it. And what I said is, I'm here to support you to get help. I believe that there's a problem here, but that's your choice. But my choice is not to be around you if you're drunk. I can't support that. I can't go out with you and go, I really think that you have a drinking problem, but hey, let's go to the bar, right? I'm not helping the problem. So what I can say is I am here for you 100%. If you want help, I am here to try and I'm here to support you. But if your choice is not to get help yet, know that I'm always here. I'm not walking away from you, but I'm not going to hang out with you. If we arrange to get together and you're drunk, I'm leaving. And I did that. And it was really hard and it broke my heart. Luckily, these people, found help. And I continue to support him to this day. But that was really hard. I did one of those when I was 16. What the heck did 16-year-old me know? Other than I don't want to be around this person when they're high. I don't. I think I can't support it. And he got help. It had nothing to do with me. So I'm not saying, oh, because I walked away. It wasn't. But in subsequent years, when I talked to him, he said that I said, oh, I'm sure that you hated me when I said that. And he goes, at first, he goes, I was annoyed because I like hanging out with you. You're my friend and stuff. But I look back now that I'm not on drugs. And I respect that you made that choice that you didn't want to be around me. That's fair. I don't want to be around people who are high.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, it takes a lot of resolve to make a decision like that, especially when it's in an uncomfortable situation, because most people would want to do whatever's comfortable and they would pacify it and be like, all right, no, it's cool. You do your thing. I'll just hang out and avoid the confrontation. But ultimately that doesn't serve either one of you. So,
no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a friend, you do tell the truth. And even if it's uncomfortable, and if they don't like it, again, they make a choice. I don't want to hang out with you because I don't like what you're saying.
Right.
Oftentimes, I'll quote Shakespeare here. Methinks the lady doth protest too much.
Yeah.
In that, it simply means the truth. The quicker we react and the harsher we react to something, the truer what was just said probably is, right? As a parent, if you ask the children whether they ate cookies, and the immediate reaction is, "I absolutely did not eat cookies." Yeah, you're pretty darn sure that they did, right? And that doesn't change as an adult. If I'm making bad nutritional choices and my girlfriend says, hey, you're really not making good choices, and my immediate reaction is, I absolutely am. I'm eating what I should, but I know that I'm not. My reaction alone validates exactly what she already knows. Not that I'm doing that. I'm eating
Right.
well. Don't worry, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. So let's talk steps, one step at a time, right? So if Epic begins with one step forward, right, and there's your plug,
Yeah.
what is the first step? What does that look like?
Well, I think it depends on what your journey is. But here's the thing. Any epic journey that we go on honestly begins with one step forward. Anything that we're doing, if you want to write a book, you got to sit down and type the first word. If you want to run a marathon, it starts off with that first step forward to start training. Overall, if you kind of have a general plan of what you need to do to get to where you want to go, that helps. But you got to keep in mind that you're not going to have all the steps. You're not going to have all the answers right now, and stuff sometimes comes along, right? I like to tell my when I'm talking about epic that we've all been on epic journeys in our life. If someone is a freshman in college, we understand what their epic journey through college is. So you don't ask a freshman, so do you have your degree yet? Because we understand that there's a process there. If you're trying to change something in your life, let's say lose some weight, on day 2, someone goes, are you done your weight loss journey? Well, no. I'm probably going to be on this for a while. I'm trying to lose 25 pounds. If I lost 25 pounds overnight, something is seriously wrong. So that first step is important because oftentimes that's the hardest step of all. But once we take it, we find that it's not nearly as hard as we anticipated in our mind.
Right.
I've been fortunate. I've run marathons in my life. When I made that decision to run a marathon, I had no idea how the heck I was going to run 26.2 miles. But I went out the door and I started to run, and I'm like, I guess I'll figure it out.
Is the attitude in which you take that first step make a big difference? So if you take that first step with the confidence that it's going to work out, how important is that?
I think it's really important. I think there's a lot of medical and psychological studies that support positive mindset is huge in success and huge in recovery and stuff. 2 years ago, I crashed on my mountain bike and shattered my shoulder and had to have surgery. I ended up having 2 surgeries on it. And, but even after that happened, I knew I'd get back on my road bike. I knew that I would be fine. And I think that had a profound effect on the speed of my recovery and my general recovery, right? Okay, so yeah, this happened and I'm laid up and and this stinks. It does. But I'm still here. I'm still thriving, and I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
I don't know what the whole path is. I got 6 months into recovery and discovered that the fracture in my humerus hadn't healed, and it broke the titanium plate that was in my arm. So I had to go back in for surgery. Nothing like going, all right, I appear to be like 50 or 60% there, and let's go back to 0 and have to do more PT. I had a choice there. I could go, oh my God, this is terrible. What am I going to do? But I'm like, well, okay, here's where I am, right? It's kind of like you go out to go to work and there's a flat tire. Are you going to boo-hoo it, or are you going to change your tire or call AAA or whatever, right? Like, I got to deal with this, right?
Yeah. But I think it's to go back to the belief of things are not necessarily good or bad in and of themselves, but it's how we show up. And
Absolutely.
I think that there's a big part of that if you show up to something with the belief that it's going to work out in your favor, this is for me personally. If you show up to anything, whether it's your day at work, a relationship, or just this conversation, with the belief that it's going to work out for good, either it's going to work out like I planned, or it's going to be a total disaster. And in 6 months from now, I'm going to realize it was a good thing. But eventually it's going to work out for my good. I think that mentality is really beneficial to be able to carry through life.
Absolutely. And I think also focusing on the 97% that is actually good in something, finding the positive. There is positive in stuff.
Yeah.
I'll use a really sort of intense example, but it's true. 28 years ago, my older sister was murdered. That was something I never expected in my life to have to deal with. But because of that, I've written 2 books about sibling loss. I'm a thought leader on sibling loss. I'm a little busier because I'm doing work for her. But more importantly, myself and my family have done all kinds of really cool things in my sister's memory, where we celebrate the rainbow that is her life, not just the dot at the end. I'm not fixated on the fact that she's dead. I'm aware of it every day. I miss her every day. But I'm just not, that's not where I am. And it feels so much better to do good things in her memory than to just focus on the fact that she was killed.
Right. Yeah, that's an incredible story. And I really can't even imagine the range of emotions that you would go through in that moment, from, I'm sure, rage and frustration to eventually you come to some understanding of it and then use it for good.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say I had a moment of clarity probably about 3 months after she was killed, where I had just been stuck on, why did this happen, right? And I had this moment of clarity. I remember exactly where I was on the Massachusetts Turnpike because I was originally from Boston. I was living in Boston at the time, where I just said, I'm never going to know why this happened, and I need to let that go. And in that moment, I did. I just said, this isn't something that I'm going to know. So I could spend the rest of my life like just circling with this and trying to figure it out. I'm not going to know. So I need to let that go. And oftentimes it is really hard for us to let something go, especially something that we feel is so very wrong.
Yeah.
But my life has been a heck of a lot better since I'm not stuck on why did this happen. I work with lots of people on the why did this happen and try and help them to come to a place where they can just let it go. Doesn't mean that you don't ponder it, but you just don't let it be all consuming.
Yeah. It makes me think about, when you mentioned that spot when you're driving, there's a place I drive past 6 or 7 times a week that in the past caused me a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. And I associate this physical place that I have to drive past on the highway, and every time I see the business sign, it caused this bit of rage. And first it would literally, anytime I would drive past it, I would be just in a miserable mood for hours after that.
Yeah.
And what I started doing was every time I would drive past, I would see the sign and I would just say, I forgive you.
Yeah.
And for me, that practice, it's been years at this point, and literally to this day, I still do it when I drive past. Just say, "I forgive you." I don't say it out loud; I say it in my head. Um, but that process for me has been really freeing, and it's also gotten to the point now where it almost brings me this weird sense of joy when I say it, because I don't hold on to this negative emotion anymore. It's become peace, and it's
Yeah.
a spot where I can really let go of what had quote unquote hurt me in the past, and now
Right.
use it for good.
I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, Jim. It's you defining the situation, not the situation defining you.
Yeah.
And that choice, the power in that choice of saying, now you feel a sense of joy because you're defining what that is. You could still be angry, but you're like, I've made a choice that it's not going to, that thing does not define me or define part of my life wholly. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have power. Here's the thing, that restaurant itself doesn't, or that sign, okay, doesn't have any power over you.
Hmm.
It's a sign. It's an inanimate object.
Yeah.
The memory of it may, but if you, again, choose to say, I'm letting this go, I will acknowledge it, but I'm not going to, for hours, be bothered by it. Yep, I drove by it. I said, I forgive you.
Yeah. It's amazing that, when you break it down that simply, the power of choice and how often we choose to be upset without even realize that we're actively choosing to be in that state of mind.
Yeah. I mean, choices, like, I honestly, I've been talking about choice for 20 years now. Because I think it is so very powerful for all of us. And as I said, I acknowledge sometimes the choices are crap and crappier. They really are. They are not good.
Right.
However, when you say I am, here's what I am choosing, there is power in that. You're like, okay, I didn't just sort of wait for something to happen. I don't know which way the wind is going to blow. I'm just going to stand here, right? Life is a participatory sport. You can choose not to participate today, but your life is still going on. It's still, the game is still happening. It's a heck of a lot better when you're out on the field playing and participating in your own life, because you are the captain of your own ship. You don't have to hold it, but the fact of the matter is you don't know where it's going, and you may be upset when you crash on the rocks.
Yeah. It's amazing when you actively take control over your own situation, the difference that it makes.
Honestly, it's life changing.
Yeah. And it's
And
really
it's
simple.
fun.
Yeah. It may not be easy necessarily to
I,
kind of to break the pattern,
yeah,
but it's really simple.
no, it's not. And change is inherently hard. Psychologically, we like structure. We like knowing what's going on. Um, Kind of a biological imperative to feel safe and stuff like that. And change is hard. If change wasn't hard, we'd all be changing all the time.
Yeah.
But you're right. You kept talking about looking back 6 months, 9 months, a year, 5 years later, and going, "Wow, that really that struggle was worth it." The things that are hard are probably the things that are rewarding. When I finished my first marathon, unbelievably rewarding. Made all the time I was running at 5 in the morning, and it was freezing and it was raining sometimes, and I didn't feel like getting out of bed. It was all worth it.
Yeah. I think there's a really powerful mindset to realize that the test you're in is part of your testimony. Like to think about this experience that I'm in right now, even though I know it sucks. At some point in the future, this is going to be a really powerful part of my story when I tell it in 6 months from now and a year from now. And just carrying that mindset to, hey, this thing right now, yeah, I could look at it as really terrible, or I could look at it as a really interesting part of my story that I don't know how it ends yet.
Be the hero of your journey.
Yeah.
Honestly. How, like, again, it's your story. You get to tell it how you want. Are you going to tell it as the hero, or are you going to tell it as the victim?
Yeah. Or let someone else tell it for you, which is what most people do.
Exactly. And make yourself the hero. Like, go, yeah, wow, this was terrible, right? There's all of us have so many epic things that have happened in our life, and the way we tell the story makes all the difference, right?
Yeah.
It's either, oh my God, that's so terrible, and I was, and it's fine. But any good story, sometimes it starts, and then there's the dip. There's something bad happens, and you're really low. And what makes a story memorable is how you came up from it. And that comes in how you tell the story, right?
Yeah.
I shared with you that I crashed on my mountain bike. Part of my hero journey there was I also had a hairline fracture in my pelvis, and I walked 1.5 miles out on a fire road. I didn't know, obviously, at the time that I had that. But boy, howdy, I love telling that part of the story because it makes me look really tough and like, look at that. I did that. Yeah, shock has a lot to do with it, and adrenaline and all of that. And why I didn't call 911 is completely stupid. Oh, I don't want to have to pay for the ambulance. I mean, come on. Turns out I was pretty hurt, but I didn't really know it. But how I tell that story is inspirational. Look at that. I did it. We all are so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
And as I said, unfortunately, the meanest person in your life is you. And the stories we tell ourselves on a daily basis are, man, like, let's just not be your biggest fan, be your biggest cheerleader, because no one else can cheer for you if you're not cheering for you. Okay. How can other people support you if I'm like, Jim, I think what you're doing is great. And you're like, oh, I don't know. I mean, geez, podcast is okay, but it's not great. And what? No. If you don't believe it, how's anyone else going to believe it? Yeah. Right? Think about advertising on TV. Our product is okay. We hope that you like it. That's not how advertising goes.
Right. Yeah, and for some reason we tell ourselves that and then get frustrated with mediocre just satisfaction in life.
Exactly. That's
so good. So we're sort of running out of time here. I do want to ask if there were one little piece of advice, right? And we talked about the one step forward, just taking it. If someone could, let me step back. If you had one bit of advice to give to someone to let them have a slightly better day today, right? We talked about being the author of their own story. We talked about just, taking that step. And it might be one of those, but what would your advice be to someone to give them an actionable, better day today?
Okay. 2 words. Not yet. Have you completed your book? Not yet. Have I hit my weight loss goal? Not yet. Have I had that difficult conversation? Not yet. The reason not yet is so powerful is there's so much hope and optimism in that. And a lot of our epic journeys they take time. They're not instant gratification. So as the people who support us, have you again, have you completed your book? Not yet. Doesn't mean that you're not going to, you're just on the road. I talked about the, freshman in college. Do you have your degree? Not yet. We understand that. No one's bugging a freshman that they don't have their degree yet.
Right.
Not yet should be your co-pilot. It really should. Because no matter what your epic journey is, it may take you time. Sometimes it takes a really long time. I went on a 7-year journey between graduate school and internship and getting licensed and the pandemic and stuff. 7 years between when I started and when I finally got licensed. But all along the way, not yet. I'm working on it. There are steps that I have to do. And some of those steps take time.
What's interesting is, when I'm looking at your name on the screen here, right after it says LPCC, it doesn't say 7 years in parentheses. It doesn't say 7 weeks. It doesn't say 14 years.
Yeah.
You got it. You did it. Right. So I think that's great advice for people to not worry about how long it's going to take and just continue to, one day at a time, take that step.
But also realize that, and also, Jim, there are things that do take time, right? There are the things that we all accept. Someone goes into medical school. We know they're not going to be on their own doctor for like 7 or 8 years. No one's sweating them about why haven't you opened your own practice? Even if it should take, let's say, between graduate school and if you really pushed it, maybe takes you 4 years to get your license. We all have life goes on. Sometimes we can't do it exactly the way we want it. We have to slow down, but we're still on that path. We're still working on it.
Yeah.
Having written books, the editing process sometimes takes a heck of a lot longer than you ever anticipated. And even after you've written a book, you're like, all right, I'm going to set aside 6 weeks for editing, and you're 8 weeks into editing and you're like, okay, it's still got little tweaks that I want to do. And it doesn't have to be perfection, Jim. It just has to be good enough for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that's exceptional advice. And I love the power of not yet.
Yeah,
it gives some hope.
Yeah, I think not yet is I love it. Other people seem to really like that idea of not yet. And because if you say no, it's such a hard stop. Right. When you were rebuilding your restaurant, hey, Jim, is the restaurant open? No. Well, now it sounds like it's never going to happen. Not yet. We just framed it. It's going to be, it's going to be a,
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah.
And I think that the comparison aspect that we put on ourselves, again, looking at choice and the things that we sabotage ourselves with, if we compare our progress, like you talked about, no one's comparing the 8-year journey of a doctor.
Yeah.
We are comparing ourselves to that one dude who posted a story on Facebook about his overnight success. And we are comparing our journey to that one instance, which may very well be fake. Like we are choosing to look at, I'm not there yet, because our comparison to stuff that is totally rooted in not our reality. So I think that's
absolutely
a great point.
And then you look at people in sports, okay? People who are playing professional sports. They certainly didn't get there overnight. There was a lot of time and work. Someone who's, I don't know, in the NBA, the NFL, whatever, that's something that for years they've been working on.
Yeah.
And it's great that they've made it. An Olympian didn't make that overnight. I had the pleasure of meeting and I can't remember his name because it's been so many years, but he was from New Zealand. He was a swimmer, won a bronze medal. And what he said to me was, it was 13 years for a minute and 30 seconds. 13 years of training for a minute and 30 seconds. And he outtouched someone by, like 1/100th of a second. Like his finger was just long enough to be able to touch the wall and get a bronze.
Yeah.
Imagine any of us spent 13 years for a minute and a half. Holy moly.
Yep. We get frustrated when it doesn't happen in 13 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's exceptional advice, and I think an excellent way to end this off. It has been a pleasure, sir. I truly appreciate it. How can we best support you going forward?
If you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com and you'll find all things epic there. And if you're interested in getting a hold of me, you can also just Google Zander Sprague, ZanderSprague, and you'll find me.
All right.
I'm there. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a blast. Dare I say epic.
I love it. Thank you.
You bet.
Hey, before you go, I'd like to pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you for this moment and for this opportunity to share this prayer with the person listening to this podcast right now. I pray that this message reaches exactly who it needs to. I pray that they have eyes to see and ears to hear this message, and that it finds them in the right opportunity when they're looking at their journey and they're not sure if they're there yet, but they understand they've taken the steps, and it's not a no, it's a not yet. I ask that you remove any fear holding them back from taking that first step, and let them boldly step into the calling that you have placed in their life, that you surround them with your peace, you guide them with your wisdom, and strengthen them with your love. In Jesus' name, amen. I love you.